The latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. The D.C. press corps is really trying to sell this idea that there is a Kamala surge happening over the last couple of days. She's in a CNN poll. She's closed the gap in terms of who Americans think is best poised to improve the economy. And if Trump only wins voters who have the economy front and center as their top issue by a couple of points, then he can't win the election, and so on and so forth. This is the Margaret Hoover. She's the host of A Firing Line, which is on PBS, which is just a tremendous insult to the legacy of a great program that was once hosted by Bill Buckley. I'm sorry they resuscitated it with a lightweight like Margaret Hoover. She's on the CNN panel presented as a GOP strategist, and as Chris LaCivita, Trump's campaign manager, tweeted out, how many CNN viewers know this quote-unquote Republican strategist is married to the Democrat nominee running against Republican incumbent Nick LaLota on Long Island for Congress? Fake news made easy. Come on, man.
That's good.
Yeah, Margaret Hoover is a hack, but like most of the other panelists on CNN and MSNBC, and generally speaking, in the D.C. press corps, she's dutifully trying to advance the flag that there is a Kamala surge.
I mean, as a veteran of two presidential campaigns, when you look at this and you're looking at the numbers here, if you're a campaign insider, what are you paying the closest attention to in these numbers, whether it's Harris cutting into Trump's lead on the economy, or in Michigan and Wisconsin, she does better on honesty and democracy by 15 points in some cases.
I think if you're the Trump campaign, you're not looking at CNN's numbers. You're looking at your own internals. and I honestly think their internals are actually giving them pause, because I think they're seeing even more. Look, they do have a lot of resources for polling, more than public media companies have, and they're probably seeing the same things that you guys are talking about, which is that there is real groundswell in the early vote. There is real enthusiasm, which is hard to measure. I have heard from Republicans that there is concern at the Trump campaign amongst the operatives that actually really do know the political wherewithal, that the turnout and enthusiasm numbers aren't where they need to be.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Who?
I've heard quite the opposite, actually. And I'm not talking about anybody spiking the football here, but it's the opposite. And by the way, in some of the final polling, Trump has extended his lead in battlegrounds as well as the national popular vote. He has he's closed in Virginia and New Hampshire to bring those states in play, perhaps even New Mexico, though that's probably a stretch.
And he's campaigned. He campaigned yesterday in New Mexico. He's going to Virginia.
So, I'm not seeing it. And it's not just the polling, of course. It's also the early voting, which we've been talking about, too. And again, with all the caveats to not extrapolate too much from early voting. But it's not just the leads, but it's also the handle in places like, well, say Philadelphia, where if you compare from 4 years ago, Republican turnout for early voting is significantly up, and Democrat turnout is substantially down, particularly among black voters. And so, again, this is all sort of modeling and predicting and extrapolating, but it's not just the polling. The early voting numbers and the turnout numbers for early voting do seem to support the trend line that has been in Trump's favor for the last couple of weeks into the close. For more on this, specific to the ground game of the two campaigns, please be joined again by Amber Duke, who is the Spectator's Washington editor. She's also the author of The Snowflakes Revolt, How Woke Millennials Hijacked American Media. Amber, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me back.
So, we know that Kamala's campaign has more money and therefore more staff, including boots on the ground in the battleground states, campaign offices and the like. But are they prosecuting a superior strategy when it comes to sort of base plus turnout?
Yeah, it's a good question, and obviously we will find out on Election Day, but my suspicion, based on the people I've talked to within the Trump campaign and Republican strategists, and even some Democrats, there is a very distinct difference in how these two campaigns are targeting voters. To start with, just from a generalized level, the Democrats are targeting voters based on demographics: women, Black, certain age groups, young voters. Whereas the Republicans have a more sophisticated micro-targeting operation, so they are targeting individuals, not demographics. They have all kinds of data you wouldn't believe on voters, which they then match to publicly available voting records, which they put into a voter file. They can basically tell you how someone with 2 cats and a husband who is a practicing Catholic has voted in the past 6 elections and which way they're probably likely to vote this time around. And they can give you their address and their media consumption habits so that they can target them with an ad on TV and make sure that door knockers hit their door. It's actually insane stuff. And the Democrats have not really bought into micro-targeting as a practice yet or as a science. So they're not using it to the extent that the Republicans are. And the way that they are using these distinct strategies is on the Kamala Harris side. They're trying to win over disaffected Democrats, which seems dangerous to me since they are losing key components of the Democratic base, Latino and Black men, to be specific, and then also uncommitted progressives who have an issue with the way Biden and Harris have handled the war between Israel and Hamas. And then on the Trump side, they are trying to basically replicate what happened in 2016, which is that no one saw coming these people who had never voted before and also low to mid propensity voters coming out in droves for Trump. The idea is now that they know this, they have the data on these people, they want to put an organized ground game behind it and actually hit their doors, call them multiple times, and make sure that they're going out to vote.
As a young woman living in Northern Virginia, how have they reached out to you, the Harris-Walz campaign?
Oh, I'm glad you asked that, because I have been reached out to incessantly by the Harris-Walz campaign, which I think proves the point that they are looking at demographics, right? 30-year-old young woman living in Northern Virginia, owns a home, is in one of the wealthiest tax codes. She's probably a Democrat, or she must be a Democrat. They obviously don't have the data on me being a regular Catholic Mass attendee. So I have been getting text messages asking me not just to vote for Kamala Harris, but actually to join the volunteer effort, to go door knock for her, to do phone banking for her and other candidates in Northern Virginia. So they have me probably targeted not just as a potential lean Democrat, but as actually a regular Democrat, given the fact that they think I'm going to actually go out and hit the ground for the campaign.
Speaking of regular church attendee, that's the one area of concern I have, particularly after that Arizona Christian University study came out that suggested 32 million Christian regular church attendees would not be voting in this election. And so, Trump wins evangelicals with 80% of the vote. So it's sort of the same thing. It's not as Kamala Harris with some of the traditional constituencies for the Democrats, which is to say it's about the spread, yes, but it's also about the volume. And you need the volume, and is that a particular concern, or is that something from your conversations the Trump campaign has seized upon?
Yes, actually both campaigns are aware of it. That's why you saw Kamala Harris launching Evangelical Voters for Harris Coalition, which frankly I thought was pretty laughable. They were trying to use videos from the late evangelist Billy Graham, whose son Franklin Graham came out immediately and said, hey guys, my dad voted for Trump before he died. And on the Trump side, they are employing a lot of help, which is, I think, both an advantage and a concern, which we can get into. But they're employing the help of a lot of third-party groups, one of which is Faith and Freedom Coalition, that is pouring a lot of money into a ground game. I talked to Ralph Reed, who is the founder of the group, and he said that they were planning on knocking tens of millions of doors ahead of the election. That they're looking at the daily reports put out by secretaries of state on who has voted so far. So they're crossing voters off their list every single day, then going back out and hitting the people who haven't gone out to the polls to actually cast their vote yet. And they're very interested in that group of disaffected Christian voters who were not planning on voting, and they're going to hit them too.
What about concerns over ballot integrity? I know Lara Trump has been weighing in on some of these controversies that have bubbled up to, uh, the public's awareness and consumption and debate. We've talked about them quite a bit. Lancaster County, Dominion machines in Michigan, early voting in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. The video that went viral yesterday of the Kentucky voting machine where the guy couldn't fill in Trump and Vance on the screen, but could Walz and Harris, and Kentucky authorities are looking into this. What's your read from your conversations about how concerned or prepared the Trump campaign is to be hyper responsive to all of these controversies, to put election authorities on notice that they're being vigilant, and these things will need to be addressed, and they're going to ensure that they are.
Mm-hmm. And let's just start by saying they really dropped the ball on that in 2020. One of the biggest problems that they had with proving Trump's claims of voter fraud was that they were coming in mostly after the fact and trying to get audits done, as opposed to being on the forefront, having poll watchers in every one of these swing districts, and making sure that things were being done originally by the books. It's really hard to prove voter fraud once it happens. So they're more prepared this time. I'm not prepared to say that they are as prepared as they should be because we haven't seen the results yet. But we do have one piece of evidence, which is that when Pennsylvania was, a county in Pennsylvania, Cook County, was reportedly turning away voters from an early vote line because the clerk decided to close at 5 p.m., even though you're supposed to allow everyone who's standing in line to vote. The Trump campaign got there. They had a lawyer. They filed a lawsuit. Initially, they actually sent a letter to the clerk demanding they stay open. And when he refused, they filed a lawsuit. And they ended up winning the suit. And the judges said that they have to keep the lines open until everyone has voted. The RNC, I talked to the chairman, Michael Whatley, a couple of months ago, and he said this is one of the most important things that they've been working on since the RNC takeover. He was a big proponent of election integrity when he was the North Carolina GOP chair. So they have a massive volunteers. They have lawyers on standby. They have a hotline for potential voter fraud cases. It's obviously much more than was done in 2020, and we'll see if it's enough.
Well, what do you predict will happen on election night, particularly in swing states?
I think most of them will actually be called on election night, except for maybe Pennsylvania.
Why is that?
But that's just my gut feeling. Okay. I don't have much evidence for that, except for some of the data I've seen on background that I can't really talk about much publicly.
Okay, but so what does that mean? You don't think the ultimate outcome will be called on election day or in the wee hours on Wednesday? Do you think it's going to be protracted based on that what you've seen that you can't disclose?
I think we'll have it by Wednesday, maybe 3 or 4 a.m. Tuesday night at the latest.
Mm-hmm.
So based on what I'm seeing, the path for Trump is the Sun Belt plus either Wisconsin or Michigan. Okay. It seems to me like Pennsylvania is a little bit more precarious. You see Trump doing his final rally in Michigan, which I think is probably because he knows how to win Michigan. He's done it before. And that was part of the surprise 2016 victory, was nobody thought he could win Michigan. And that's all he really needs, plus the Sun Belt, to take this thing.
That assumes Georgia and North Carolina in his column.
Right.
Yeah.
Any hope for Virginia, though, where you are?
That's interesting. I would normally say no, but the early vote numbers are very interesting here, of course. And actually, if I may correct myself, I actually just got some updated numbers. It's actually not what I just said. It's actually the Sun Belt in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A friend was listening and sent me a text to let me know that
I love friends.
Well, I mean, that's,
right.
But everyone keeps saying the road to the White House is Pennsylvania, so.
Yeah, I mean,
Sun Belt in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And you see, of course, both campaigns making a big push there. But I certainly think Michigan and Wisconsin are at play as well. On to the Virginia question, the early voting is really interesting because you see that in the Trump counties in, Southwest Virginia mostly, and some of the central Virginia counties, that their early vote turnout has increased by a much higher percentage than the Democratic counties have. So let's say Southwest County in Pennsylvania has increased by 150%. A comparable Democrat county has only increased by 50 to 75%. So to me, that doesn't suggest that Trump's going to win Virginia, but it suggests that there is a Republican enthusiasm that the Democrats have been trying to reject for the past month or so.
Well, right, and we've seen that in Pennsylvania too, where some of the data analysis I've seen suggests that the blue wall number that they enjoyed in 2020 is a fraction of what it was is a fraction of what it is in 2024, and some polling from Scott Rasmussen's outfit suggests that, at least for the states that he's been able to put some numbers together, it doesn't seem like the GOP early vote is necessarily significantly cannibalizing the election day vote, so that this really could represent a Trump voter surge.
Yeah, and I think what people should also understand about early voting is that it is a pretty great advantage for any campaign because, again, you have the Secretary of State vote tally that comes out pretty much every single day, I think, in all of these states. And they can match that to their voter file of people whose doors they've knocked or whose phones they've hit.
Right.
And they can cross them off the list. They don't have to worry about them again heading into Election Day. They can target and narrow their focus on just those people on their list who haven't voted yet, which they know this. This is all public data for the most part. So it does shrink the operation required to run through Election Day, which I think, again, based on the fact that Democrats are targeting demographics, Republicans are targeting individuals, I think that's an advantage for Republicans if they're actually putting this much effort into an early vote.
Amber Duke is the Spectator's Washington editor. She's also the author of The Snowflakes Revolt, How Woke Millennials Hijacked American Media. Amber, thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy using the AM 560 mobile app. Download it today at 560theanswer.com/mobile.
If you're self-employed,